am living well, and I intend to continue to.
Not going to tell him about the exposure or
Nope.
anything.
Well, let's face a couple things, you know. The day we're born, we're on the route to dying, you know. And you could walk out the door and get hit by a truck.
You know that you're near death, don't you?
Yes,
How near?
very. I'm afraid that it's going to be a matter of days. Maybe not even that long.
Good evening. I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline.
Okay, so maybe this birthday card isn't one of a kind, but the person getting it sure is. Oh, that's nice.
Ken Meeks is literally on his deathbed. As our Nightline cameras followed him over the past 9 months, he knew that eventually it would come to this. We'll show you his story tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
As we begin this program tonight, Ken Meeks is delirious, fading in and out of a coma. He will die very soon. From the first, he has known that we were putting together a chronicle of his last months, of his dying. But I am also bound to tell you what his friend Jack STEINHOEBEL told me after what would be my last conversation with Ken. Ken, he said, looks upon this as his last teaching assignment. And it is not a process of dying, but a process of living. There was news today, as you may have heard, of a medical breakthrough that may extend the lives of AIDS victims. The news, I'm sure, would have pleased Ken Meeks, even though for him, it comes too late. This story you're about to see was put together over the last 9 months by Nightline producer Bob LeDunn and by Nightline correspondent Jed Duval.
Good afternoon, Gay Men's Health Crisis Hotline.
Those who telephone a hotline about AIDS often find that the counselor who answers has a lot of experience with AIDS, too much so.
Now, about 15% survive a 3-year period after diagnosis.
That is Ken Meeks speaking, and he had, as you see him here in January of 1986, survived for 2 years.
Okay, but you have to take care of yourself, you know, and I think that you have to plan for the future, you know, and say, you know, from your point of view, say you're going to beat it as best you can and have that positive attitude, and that's what'll help get you through.
Ken Meeks was born in New Jersey 45 years ago, this past Tuesday. Since he was diagnosed as an AIDS sufferer, he has been trying to teach others.
Right. The incubation period may be as long as 5, 6, 7 years.
It really is Dr. Meeks. Ken owns a Ph.D. in economics. As a young man, he attempted to lead a straight life, was married, but 3 months later lost his wife in an automobile accident. After that tragedy, while teaching economics, he met the owner of a pet store, Jack STEINHOEBEL. That was 12 years ago. They have been lovers and friends and, as Jack says, life partners ever since.
Our lives are so close that I'm dying inside myself for fear that I may lose him.
It was 2 years ago that Ken was forced to confront AIDS by the emergence of sores, a skin cancer called Kaposi sarcoma. To gays, simply KS.
There were a couple of other lesions that developed before February and before the major onslaught of the illness. And as these other things showed up, I said to myself, you know, Ken, this KS, you have AIDS.
And I screamed. I paced the house for a half hour, wringing my hands. I have never been so scared in my life. Not for myself, for what I knew was going to take place in our lives. The terror had hit home. What we had seen on television, what we heard on the radio, or what we had read in magazines was in our house.
Ken has AIDS. Jack does not. Why?
I happen to have been in the wrong place at the right time. Fingers are fine.
They decided to tell Meeks' parents, his mother Fernanda and his dad, a retired truck driver.
That was a very difficult day. His mom and dad, although we've been together 10 years, really were not aware that we were gay and living a gay lifestyle.
It was almost in that classical joke that, hi, Mom and Dad, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is I'm gay, and Jack is my lover. We got through that part, you know, and then we had the rice pudding, and then I said, and I have some bad news. I have AIDS. Mother was absolutely terrified. She was convinced I was going to be dead within a couple of days.
We should start all over again?
Yeah.
Ken reports that his mother began to accept the terrible news, and his father was stoic. Jack reports that he wishes those parents had been his own.
She's what I would have wanted in a mother. I was an abused child, both physically and sexually and emotionally. And she has all those qualities that you want in a parent. And his father is the same way. He knows we're good people, and he knows we love each other an awful lot. They're really super, super people. I love you.
Ever since that time, Ken, with Jack alongside, has been fighting the losing battle, attempting to delay, to postpone, to win where winning is impossible.
Sometimes people ask me when I'm going to die. And I have no expectation of death around the corner. Sometimes I'll tell them in a little black humor that I was supposed to die last week and I forgot to write it in the calendar, and so now I don't know when it's going to be.
At the time these pictures were taken, death was, for Ken, a darkness beyond the horizon. But it was there and approaching steadily as the virus attacked his immune system.
Nightline correspondent Jed Duval will continue to trace the story of Ken Meeks in a moment.
This is Sunday.
Here again is Nightline correspondent Jed Duval with the story of Ken Meeks. The story picks up early last spring.
We have 8,000 and some odd deaths related to those diagnoses. But we have 8,000 people who haven't died yet. I'm one of them.
Ken Meeks, once an effective teacher of economics, became a public lecturer on AIDS.
It seems to me that to single out a group of people and say that because God does not approve their behavior, God has invented an illness to strike them down, limits God, makes God much too small.
I cannot believe that my God would do this to me because I love that man. I can't believe he would be that cruel. If he is, I don't want to know him. He's my loving God.
Scott died on Friday. Neither Jack nor I have fingers and toes left to count the people we know who have died from AIDS in the last 10 months. We average 2 friends a month. And those are people we know. They're not the people we don't know.
We may be gay, but yes, we still have feelings, we still have love. We still care about one another. It's very hard.
I don't have questions, but I would like to please all parents not to desert their children when they come down with AIDS. How can they do that? They wouldn't do that if they had any other disease. Why do they leave when they have AIDS? It's something I can't understand. It's just beyond me. They need you so desperately, and they just turn their backs on them. It's hard to understand.
These are the most special people that have ever happened to me. They're loving, kind, everything you would ever want in parents. They have a difficult time feeling that the education that their son has had is being wasted. I disagree with that. I feel what Ken is doing is fighting for 5,000 other people right now who have AIDS in this city. And I look at him as their spokesman. And many of them may not survive. But they have a voice in Ken, and I think I want Mom and Dad to understand how special that their son is and how proud he is of you, too. Some good comes of this.
As long as he could take the strain, Meeks joined rallies to raise money to fight AIDS. At one such rally, the audience of 6,000 rose in recognition. It was one of the high moments of Ken Meeks' life.
It is so exciting to be able to look out on you and see this outpouring of love and affection and concern. I wish each of you could be in my position right here to see what's out there in front of me.
That was in May. For nearly a year, Ken had been in and out of chemotherapy.
Have you noticed any change in any of the skin disease since we've seen you last?
Some of the oldest lesions seem to be much lighter. This particular chemotherapy medication that I'm on the side effect is one of reducing white cell output, which would further reduce my immunity to other illnesses.
You could just sit here a whole day watching the whole change of what's taking place.
In Ken's mind, there was one last trip to be made. He had long hoped to go by train across America. Last month, he and Jack began their ride, taking their own home movies as they toured the South and Southwest.
Hi, Mom and Dad. This is the most glorious, colorful, beautiful, natural, what can I say?
The high point of the trip, being on the Golden Gate Bridge, is also the end of the journey. The trip is broken off because of his rapidly worsening condition. At San Francisco General Hospital, physicians find cancer rampant, sores, fluids. There is nothing they can do but ease the pain. On Tuesday, Ken summons all his energy for his 45th birthday party. He is there in the hospital room with all his loved ones. It is a happy time.
Happy birthday to you.
According to the Centers for Disease Control, nearly 25,000 people have contracted AIDS in the United States. Slightly over half have died. All are expected to. Unlike Ken Meeks, many spend their last days without friends and family. They are left alone, rejected, forgotten. It is expected that in just a little over 4 years, the number of AIDS cases will have reached 179,000. Jed Duval for Nightline.
My final conversation with Ken Meeks when we return. As we followed Ken Meeks' progress over these past 9 months, we all knew that a time would come when we would have our final conversation. That time came last Tuesday, ironically, on Ken Meeks' 45th birthday. Ken, it almost sounds like what they used to call meanie jokes in the old days, to say happy birthday, but it is your birthday and you are celebrating it. Is there any happiness in it for you at all?
Well, of course, yes. Life is something that's exciting, and life is something that goes on. And just because there's an illness which may be terminal, that doesn't mean that you give up living.
What have you been doing today?
Oh, we did some of the normal things, and then this afternoon we had a little birthday party. We had a cake and had some little gifts, fun gifts, and just had a grand old time.
I'm going to ask you this question. you and one of our staff people talked before, so it is not a question that is coming at you out of the blue, but I know a lot of people are wondering, as they are watching now, why you have permitted us, A, to follow you around for these last few months, and B, why at a time when you really need to harbor your energies, why you've agreed to talk to me today.
I think it's terribly important that people be educated in the area of AIDS. And that's what I'm doing. There are other people who are unable to do that. There are other people who can't do that. I can, I'm able, so I should.
If you had to do it all over again, and I'm going to talk now about a subject that clearly is related here, and that is homosexuality. If you had to do it again, because this too is one of the things that people talk about in straight society when they're talking among themselves. They say, well, it's inevitable that this kind of thing is going to happen. If you had to do it all over again, would you have had a homosexual relationship?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It is not the relationship. It is not the type of sex that is responsible for the illness.
I'd like to step in here, you know.
Please, go ahead.
Being a homosexual, Ted, has nothing to do with what's taken place in our lives. This virus could have entered into our society through any number of places. It happened to come into the gay community first. My homosexuality is not choice. I mean, I didn't sit down one day and say, I think I'll be a homosexual for the rest of my life. This is not a choice. This is not something where I can choose the color of my eyes as easily as I can choose the color of my shirt for the day. I am a homosexual, and that's a fact. It's not something that I've decided to do. And I think many people have just got to learn that. Those people who you can't reach will never be reached. You have to concentrate on those people who are willing to accept and learn. Those are the important people.
You know, in one sense, this story, your story, has been a story of watching a disease take its toll. But in another sense, it has been very much a chronicle of a love story. You two love each other very much, don't you?
Yes, indeed.
That's something also that a lot of people in the straight community have a great deal of trouble understanding. I don't know whether it's, if someone said to me, explain why you love your wife, I'm not sure I could do that to their satisfaction either. But let me ask you both, why do you love each other? Jack?
This is the most special human being I've ever met in my life. This man has more love and compassion inside of him than a football stadium full of people. And not only does he treat me that way, he treats everyone that way.
Ken, if I put the same question to you, why do you love this man?
Jack is the most caring, the most interested, the most wonderful person who's ever found his way into my life. I can't say I wouldn't be alive today without him, but there is some truth in that. His caring, his interest, his support. It is just tremendous.
When we come back, Ken Meeks talks about the message he wants to leave behind. The conclusion of our conversation with AIDS victim Ken Meeks. Ken, you are obviously a man who has been able to look personal tragedy in the eye. I won't say unblinkingly because I don't know what goes on in your own mind, in your own heart, but certainly it takes an extraordinary amount of courage to do what you are doing right now, to talk with me, knowing that our conversation is being seen by millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you're near death, don't you?
Yes.
How near?
Very. I'm afraid that it's going to be a matter of days,
maybe not even that long.
And yet you're still willing to expend what must be, for you at this point, an enormous amount of energy and whatever remaining strength you have for this conversation. And I think I will leave it with that by asking you why it is so important to you that quite literally you are willing to expend some of your last breaths on saying what you're going to say now.
You know, we all have things we have to do. This is one thing I feel I have to do. There are 240 million people out there calling themselves Americans. There are billions of other people out there in the world who call themselves human beings. And I have an obligation to them, just as they have an obligation to me.
Anything else you'd like to say?
I think that's about it.
I think it is. Ken Meeks, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome, Ted.
I don't know what to say to you. I wish you well. I wish you tranquility and peace and happiness with your friend. And thank you for being with us. And Jack, the same to you.
Thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you, Ted.
For those of you who may want more information on AIDS and its treatment, we will be putting up the telephone number of the National AIDS Hotline in just a moment. So we suggest that you get a pencil and paper ready.
The odds aren't too good for long term at this moment. Okay? But you have to take care of yourself, you know, and I think that you have to plan for the future, you know, and say, you know, from your point of view, say you're going to beat it as best you can.